How are you?
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us here tonight for the 2022 fiscal year budget summit. We've tried to make this an annual event where we can talk about a number of different things where we are in time. What's interesting about the budget summit is that we're at a point now where we can talk about how we finished fiscal year 21, actually fiscal year 20, where we are in 21, and then also what we plan to see for, what we're looking to see for fiscal year 2022. And then also probably provide some budget guidance to all of you as to what we're looking at this point in time. That's based on primarily on the revenue forecast that we have at this point in time. So I want to thank I want to thank Mike Johns, I want to thank George Samia and Maria Moldova for helping to prepare this presentation tonight. We did speak with Dr. Amy Bertos and with Bill Euchner earlier in the process, probably a couple weeks ago, just to kind of go over where we were financially, what we were looking at, and certainly their input was very helpful to us as well. So thank you to both of them for participating in this process too. So what I'd like to do at this point in time is to have the three board chairmen call their meetings to order so that we can do this properly and according to the open meeting laws. So I'll start with the Board of Selectmen.
Make a motion, Ed?
I make a motion that the Board of Selectmen meeting be called to order.
I'll second it.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
5-0.
All right, and we'll go to the school committee.
Rob, you want to make a motion?
Sure, I'd like to make a motion that the school committee meeting be called to order.
Tina?
Aye.
I guess
I'll
that's a second. All in favor of school committee?
Great,
That's good,
Aye.
thank you.
excellent. And then we'll go to the advisory committee.
Bernard, you want to make a motion?
I'd like to mention to, this is on behalf of the advisory committee to start the meeting.
Second?
All in favor for the advisory committee?
Great.
Yep.
All right, thanks, everyone. Appreciate your indulgence, and thanks for joining us here online as well. So, all right, so let's get started tonight. We'll try and roll through this. The process that we're going to try and go through tonight is that we'll have a question and answer period after each segment of the presentation. It's broken out into about 3 or 4 segments. We'll try and, our goal is to be out of here no later than 8:30. Hopefully we'll be out earlier, so, but if, you know, we've allotted that amount of time just in case you have questions that we want to try and answer for you. If we don't answer anything tonight, we'll get back to you with the answers. I just remind everybody that tonight is really just the start of the budget process. So we've got, several months ahead of us. And I will note, too, that this meeting normally takes place in the later part of November, but based on where we are this year and given the circumstances of being in COVID-19, we want to start it earlier, so we've actually started this about 3 weeks earlier than what we normally do in terms of schedule. So that's where we're at, and I wanted to say, again, thank you for all being here early in this process tonight. So let's turn to the presentation on page 1, or page 2, rather. I'll go to that, sorry. I'll do that with my clicker here, thank you.
You're up.
It just went up.
Okay, great, excellent. So this is the agenda for tonight's meeting. It's a review of the fiscal 2020 close, turnbacks and collections, and then moving on to the status of the fiscal year 2021 budget, and that will be the second segment. The third will be the fiscal 2022 revenue projections, and segment 4 will be the 2022 budget strategy. Okay. Let's take a look at how we finished fiscal year 2020. There was a lot of concern when we first had the conversation about COVID-19 impacts early in the process of the budget discussions that started in March and April of this past year. We actually turned town meeting into June as opposed to May, which we normally do, given the fact that we didn't have a state budget. And I will say, as at this point in time, we still don't have a state budget. We just heard recently that the governor has given his budget indication, and then I was waiting for the House to actually submit its budget, which we think maybe is as early as the end of this week. And then it goes to the Senate for their consideration, and then back to the governor for final, and then conference committee for final action. Now, what's the good news about that is that the state budget freed up about freed up some money for us this year, so we didn't have to. We're not as bad going into fiscal 21, so that as opposed to what we thought we were going to be given the circumstances. So, but as we finished out fiscal 20 rather. We actually were in a situation where we had one of the biggest turnbacks in the town's recent history. The departments turned back a total of $1.3 million collectively, which historically speaking is somewhere in the order of about, I think the highest amount we had done previously was about $800,000. So this is a significant milestone for the town. I think it was in the previous fiscal year before last. it was around $500,000. The departments did a terrific job of saving the money. Obviously, people weren't at work every day, so numbers didn't have to get money, didn't have to get spent on certain things. But certainly, I give credit to all the departments, including all the people that are identified here. There was money, significant money that came back from the school department, significant money that came back from police and fire, and all the operating departments, as you can see right here. Group insurance was probably the biggest number that we were able to turn back of $203,000. And but again, it's actually the schools department actually was the second biggest one with a $377,000 turn back. So due to the pandemic and remote work, expenses such as OT and office staff expenses decreased substantially, as is pointed out. And the grant from the CARES Act and FEMA, for example, helped offset the COVID-related expenses totaling $963,000 for the end of fiscal year. So a lot of the expenses that we had towards the end of the fiscal year were offset by the COVID CARES Act money. So it was good to be able to do that. All right. So the review of the closeouts for the other revenues, property taxes, local receipts, and state aid, you can see despite the revenue collections being down, we still did a pretty good job of collecting the money. So our collections averaged, if you average all three of these categories together, which are the three big categories, we averaged around over 98% in terms of collections. That's pretty standard in terms of how we collected over the years. So we didn't see, even while some of the local receipt money was down, the other areas were up in property tax and state aid, so we actually did okay in terms of the overall situation. We were nervous about that, but as it turned out, it came out pretty good. So, taking a look at grants received during the COVID-19 as of October 20th, we've had about, in total, if you take a look at all the different grants that have been received by the town, and right up to this point, I think we're about $2.3 million between CARES Act money, which was obviously the biggest one, 1.5, and then the rest of them were, we had education grants, we had public safety grants, we had a whole bunch of them. And to the credit of all the departments that are represented here, you can see they've actually gone out there on their own collecting some grant money that was really not, of your garden variety type of grants. One that sticks out is say for instance, the town clerk was able to get money from the private sector actually for doing the elections in a very healthy and safe way of $7,800. So I give credit to the town clerk for doing that. Fire department picked up some money on their own for public safety grants. You can see that the school department has picked up a substantial amount of money on their own, in addition to the FEMA and CARES Act money, another $652,000, so we're grateful for that. And they've needed it because obviously the impacts of the school department has been very significant, but they were able to offset a lot of those costs because of that. COA picked up another $15,000 just from money from a regional planning grant for helping to move people around, to help pick people up and move them from place to place. And then also we were successful this year, in this fiscal year, and thanks to Marie's effort, who really headed up the CARES Act reimbursement effort, so grateful for all that work that you put into that. We were able to get approval for a new van for the COA, as well as money for the computers for the school department, for all the kids, so they could work remotely if they needed to. So that's all been asked for reimbursement. We've actually received about $1 million of that money already, and that, and then we've actually submitted for the other $558,000 in CARES Act money that we were eligible for. We've submitted for that, and we're waiting for approval of that as well. So that will come in this fiscal year for consideration. I just want to note, this is late breaking news, but I did see on CNBC this afternoon late that obviously a lot of the election stuff was really impacting the ability of the federal government to act during the last few weeks. But I did see that Senator McConnell announced this afternoon that it's his goal to actually have a fiscal stimulus package in by the end of the calendar year, and also to come up with money for state and local aid, which is something that has been missing from the formulas up to now. But it's also been a very big consideration on the Democratic package. So I think that's something that he's now looking to revisit, and I think we will see something come out of that. So just have to wait for the dust to clear over the presidential side and some of the Senate races, but if that happens and the Senate retains control of the Senate, the Republicans remain control of the Senate, there'll be discussion on that with the Democrats on the House side to get that figured out and get a package together for, which will still be President Trump, which I think he will certainly support at this point, they too. So we'll see what happens with that. All right, let's take a look at the status of the budget revenues as of October 20th. So let me just look at that piece, but if there's any questions about the first, I'm going to take a few minutes for questions for the first part of that, which was the closeout of the fiscal year 2020. All right, I'll take one out, and I'll come right to you, to Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you. This was a very nice introduction. Regarding the local receipts for 20, I recall at some point, together with Larry, you had given us a heads up with George that there may have been some hiccup. So right now, even with the stadium, is pretty much, so the transition to the end, let's say, has been well met?
Yeah, so if you can see, the local receipt side of the closeout was down to about 96% collected. So we did feel some impact in fiscal year 2020 because there were no stadium events during the last quarter of fiscal year 2020. So we didn't see, there was very few, there were no soccer events, there were no concerts, and traditionally, in the last quarter of the fiscal year, we would see maybe one big concert event that would come in, and that would certainly help our revenues at the end of the fiscal year. We clearly did not see that this year, so that represents some of that 0.4% that we didn't collect. All right, the 4%.
Thank you.
All right, Stephanie?
The savings on group insurance,
Yep.
so that's not COVID related though, is that just we got a better rate than we anticipated?
Yes, exactly right. So we actually got a better rate. We had budgeted a number, and the number came in lower than we thought. Also, in this fiscal year, they actually declared a premium holiday, which affected not only the employees, but also the town. So we'll see, we're actually going to run ahead in that account. It was all for this fiscal year, in the current fiscal year. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so during the tax rating setting process for FY21, revenue estimates were further adjusted. And what that means is effectively that once we started looking where we were and then understood the impacts of some of the things that we estimated for this fiscal year, we could make further adjustments in that, so we could go ahead and then set the tax rate, which will be before the Board of Selectmen later this month. New growth was estimated at 650, and the actual number came in at $750,000, or $748,307 to be exact. But the reason why we were glad to see that, because we didn't know. We thought that new growth was going to tail off a little bit. But it actually was better than what we anticipated. So that's an offset towards setting the tax rate as it comes up. The state aid was increased to be level with the governor's recent budget, as per the Department of Revenue. That was their direction to us. So we had actually underestimated that revenue by about $1.2, $1.3 million. So we actually then took and lowered our local receipts to offset that. So which means that our local, when we started the year off at a lower local receipt number to begin with, per the actions that were taken by the advisory committee to take it down to about $10.5 million, we then took it down further to about $8.9 million, which is rather significant in many ways. So that means that we have less stress on us to collect money on the local receipt side because of that. So that's actually good news as well. All right, so the revenues from the local receipts are down as expected for this year. Taking a look at the October 2020 status, where we the property taxes were budget. The estimate was $53,941,000, and total collected is $17 million. This is all as of right now. So we're not surprised by any of this. This is pretty much where we think we would be. The only number that's a little bit off right now is, and it was anticipated, is the local receipts, and we were just looking at that earlier tonight. Things that are impacting that, of course, are really 3 or 4 categories. The building permits are down, and they're down. But interesting enough, they're not down significantly versus 2 years ago. They were about $150,000. Right now, we're running about $120,000. But there was a big jump in building permits last year. We're up around $440,000. But at the end of the year, even the year that was down in the first quarter, it was up around $1.4 million by the end of the year. So even if we're looking at that, we're trending, we're still trending down. But there are some big projects that we're looking at right now. I know the building commissioner just told me we have a $100,000 permit coming in within the next week or so. And then we've had another major projects over at Schneider Electric. And we're looking at some other projects that will probably start in the spring. You'll see a pretty substantial jump in permits at that time of year. As far as the state aid goes, we're pretty much on track with that at the 32.9%. No real surprise on that. And of course, stadium events are down. We're due to receive, regardless of that, $1.7 million. 1.5 is a pilot payment. Another $200,000 or more is for rental of the space for the paper company, which comes in with that payment as well. So we'll see about a total about 1.7, even if they don't hold a single event in the stadium between now and next June. So we'll hopefully see that money come back to us. We'll see some events happen before the end of the fiscal year. Property taxes and state aid revenues remain strong. We don't see any reason for concern in either one of those categories at this point in time. Don't forget that a lot of folks get concerned about taxes being collected, but as George pointed out to the Finance Committee, the Advisory Committee the other night, that many people have their taxes or their taxes set aside as part of their mortgage, and so the mortgage companies pay us directly, in many cases. And the only people that don't do that are ones that have either paid off their house, and a lot of times seniors will come in and just pay cash for those. So we've remained open. The office has remained open since July. So we've been able to still collect from folks, and if they send us a check, certainly we'll cash that too. Yeah.
Bill, two questions. So just so that to get a better sense of measurement, last year for the fiscal year 2020 budget revenues as of October of 19, where did we stand just to have a benchmark for local receipts? In other words, compared to that, call it 12% last year for the 20 in 19.
Yeah, it's down. There's no question. It's down right now. And in comparison, I think, Marie, do you want to address that? Because we actually looked at that in comparison.
Okay.
Yeah, one second.
It's not surprising to us because we've anticipated this, but the number is down.
Yeah, when you look at FY19, the first 4 months compared to the recent 4 months, local receipts are down 65%.
Okay.
And it's those four categories: your pilot, your building permits, hotel, motel, and meals tax.
Okay, good to know. And my second question, ironically, wouldn't you argue that the $1.3 million from the closeout that's going to be now part of the free cash, ironically,
Yes.
will help us?
Certainly will.
Okay.
Certainly will.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, actually, you'll see at the end of the presentation, we'll show you where we are with our free cash position. So actually, it's our estimate of free cash because it's not been certified yet, but we're waiting to get that done. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. All right, so the departments continue to curb their spending. As you can see from here, there's no real alarming expenditures in any of these accounts. The debt service, the reason why debt service and insurance are higher than normal in terms of, this time of year. Normally this year, the spending would be somewhere around 25 to 27%. So, but it seems a little bit higher in the bottom line. That's because we haven't offset any of these expenses with the returns from the CARES Act. That won't be done until everything has been received by the state and certified. If you do that, it's another $821,687 that will be reduced off the expenditure side, and so that actually increases that amount to about 27% expended for this fiscal year at this point in time. So we're right on track. There's no reason for us to be alarmed at any of that. The one thing that I will also say is that payments like debt service and insurance payments, we typically pay those right in the start of the fiscal year. So those are pretty big ticket items. So we pay that money right out of the gate. So that accounts for why those numbers are so large at this point in time. Okay. All right. So one thing I do want to say, and that's the fact that assuming that the one thing that's really important here too is that folks here are being very careful about how they spend the money, and we talk about it on a weekly basis of where we are. Some of it is stuff we have to spend because we just want to keep everything running. School departments have been truly challenged by that, I know, because of all the things that they've been dealing with. But, you know, we've been building up stockpiles of stuff too, just to get us through I think we'll probably be okay through most of next fiscal year with the stockpile of stuff that we have. I can't speak for the school department on that. I know that Bill's trying to address that, and Amy, but I think that, you know, obviously they're challenged by personnel issues too. That will be a challenge to make sure they make everything balanced. But that assumes we get no further money in COVID-19 aid for the rest of the year. As I just indicated, you know, it looks like there's going to be movement in the House and Senate and on the federal level to try and support that. The good news about that situation is that everybody's in the same boat we are. So when that happens, that means we're not going to be left alone hanging out there in the wind. And we're going to get help because everybody needs it as well. Yeah, Bernard?
Bill, again, I may not be thinking correctly, but I thought that what we approved in town meeting last year was, call it $84 million. I'm just trying to.
What is it? I'm
On
sorry.
Article 4, right here we have, call it $90 million, the budget, 89, 85, 2924.
But that also includes the water and sewer as well. Okay.
Gotcha, thank you.
Right. And also debt service and things of that nature, and everything's rolled into that number, everything. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at the general fund revenue summary for forecast for FY 2022. Any last questions before we talk about the budget for where we currently stand? Okay, I think we're in pretty good shape there. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at the general fund revenue summary for FY 22, looking forward now. All right, so the summary above presents all the general fund revenues for use in FY 22. The projection is based on the most current data available. Overall, general fund operating revenues are projected to increase by 2.69%, or almost 2.7%, over the prior fiscal year. State aid and local receipts projections were adjusted based on historical data and the current pandemic we are living in. The available funds show a decrease of $108,000, but that's mostly due to the fact we have fewer turnbacks than we had in previous fiscal years. These numbers can and will change prior to Springtown meeting, so these are just the first glance of where we think we stand at this point in time. We did not anticipate any kind of an increase in state aid at this point, so we're gonna maintain the number that we have at least. We'll see where that comes in, and we're also assuming that we're gonna increase local receipts by about $400,000. But remember that we're now doing that based off an $8.9 million base, which is a much lower base than we were when we started this fiscal year. All right, so we're still operating at a much lower base number in that respect. So the total increase is about $2.1 million, and then you subtract out the $108,000 of available funds, and we're running at about $2 million, $2,057,000, which is 2.7%, which most people can't even say they can do that right now. So we're actually in a better position in many ways to address that. All right. So general fund, the tax levy forecast for FY '22. The prior year levy limit is, this is how we raise the taxes and raise the money. It's based off the fiscal '21 levy limit, which was $49,768,722, and the fiscal year '22 levy limit with a 2.5% increase is $51,761,247. The Proposition 2.5 levy increase is $1,294,031, and that's the that's the total increase. So that you add that to that number together, along with new growth estimate of $550. Again, that's $200,000 less than what we actually collected in this past year. So we're actually anticipating that to stay fairly flat and actually go down a little bit. But obviously, if these numbers increase, we can adjust the budgets to reflect that, and the income to reflect that. The debt exclusion levy is that's stuff that's already borrowed. We did debt exclusions. And that money is, and that amount is $2,108,224. In that number you can see is actually going down because we're not adding to that number. We haven't done that in quite some time. So it's down now about $68,000. So the total tax levy is now going to be $55,717,059, and that's an increase of 1.775 million, or 3.29% over the current fiscal year. So as far as state aid forecast, you can see it's all been zeroed out at this point in time. We may actually see that number actually increase based upon what the Senate and House do. And if that does, we can certainly make another further adjustment here, because that'll be our new base number to work off in next fiscal year. I think it's probably safe to say we should continue to be conservative in this number, because I think, from what I'm hearing, is that 22 is going to be a more difficult year than 21 in terms of how they're going to balance things. But if the federal stimulus package comes through, it could actually help that situation offset it. In terms of local receipts, we're only, like I said, indicated in it to bump that up by about $400,000 roughly. But as you can see, over the 3-year averages and the 5-year averages, we've been averaging somewhere around $11.3 million each year. We're actually looking at about a little over $9 million, $9.2 million for next fiscal year, knowing full well that we're still not going to see the collection rate that we'd like to see. But bear in mind, though, that this is a really interesting part, because we'll be into calendar year 21 next year, which means that most people project the calendar year 22 to be the better year in terms of where we're going to be with with things getting better from COVID-19. So calendar year 22 should be, and that's part of fiscal year 22, which actually would be January through June. So we may actually see some improvements, which means that the economy can be kick-started. We'll see where that takes us, and hopefully that'll be helping us in that regard. But it'll be it'll be up to $9,370,471 in terms of our estimate at this point in time. All right. So local receipts are projected to increase by $390, or 4.35%. The 7-year average is about $11.25 million. Given the current pandemic, we're estimating meals, hotel, motel, and permits very conservatively. The numbers can change prior to Springtown meeting based off actual collections in the current fiscal year. Generally, local receipt projections are based on the average revenue received in each year. We're including the meals tax estimate in this section for budgetary purposes, although a portion of the local option taxes is dedicated to funding of the annual OPEB contribution and for road improvements. Revenues are continuously monitored throughout the year and fiscal year to see how they are aligning with our project, with our projections. Everybody will recall that we did not make our OPEB payment this year, and that we did not put additional money towards highway improvements either this year. So we've actually taken that into consideration and more or less taken that revenue off the table. So it's just a portion that we're looking at right now, but generally speaking, we know the number's going to come in low, and I think that our estimate is very conservative based on the current trajectory where we are at this point in time. All right, so as far as the general fund available funds forecast for the other areas of consideration, overlay surplus, we're anticipating to use $1.1 million of that towards the budget, $960,000 of free cash, up just about $60,000 from the previous fiscal year. So, and what's interesting about that is that we actually more or less replaced that money with a lot of the money that came in from the feds, while we were offsetting the budget this year. So that's actually not a bad number, and we should be okay because of that. The ambulance fund receipts are up just a couple $100,000 to help offset that. Or that revenue continues to come strong. We've not seen any reasons to back off of that number at this point in time. So I think we're in pretty good shape there too. Recreation revolving, that's a number, of course, that's a concern if you look at it, because there's not a lot happening with recreation right now, but that goes directly towards the offset of the programs themselves. So if there's no programs running, they're not going to generate the money anyways. So it wouldn't be necessarily a major consideration in that revenue stream. Any questions about that at all? Okay. All right. So let's turn into the indirects. Indirect costs are for the water and sewer funds. This is the amount of money that we charge back to the water and sewer funds to offset the administrative, health insurance, pension costs, things of that nature, like for all the employees that work in that division. That's about, we're estimating to use the same number as we did last year of $1,250,000. We're not looking to adjust that at this point, but if we do, it gets raised on the fee side anyway. So it really doesn't have an impact on the budget itself. It just means that we have to raise more when we set the rate. Okay, and then in terms of free cash, this is the number that we're looking to generate. It'll be a $3.2 million free cash position. Now, I think everybody will admit the fact that this number is down from what we've normally done year after year, but that's no surprise to us because it's been one of these years where we're getting through each year. We're paying everything that we need to pay, and we're not running into any deficits anywhere to do that. But we're not generating additional money either because we're not having major events at Gillette Stadium or excessive amounts in hotel, motel, or meals tax. So that has a direct impact on that number itself. So we're estimated to be 3.2, and that's based on everything that we've looked at, and still has to be certified through the DOR, but we don't have any reason to think otherwise at this point in time. Now, the 3-year average for our free cash position was about $7 million, and the 5-year average is about $6 million, $6.6 million. So obviously that number's down in terms of where we've been. But look at really the effect has been in fiscal year 2020 and 21, and dare say it will be in fiscal 22. Looking for a rebound in 22 into 23, and I think we'll be okay. But here's really the most important thing for you to consider here. So the next slide. So everybody talks about free cash as being our rainy day fund. It's really not. Free cash is excess revenues that we have over and above our rainy day fund, which is actually our stabilization fund and our capital stabilization. So we have another $4.4 million that we could actually tap into if we needed to, if we really get stuck in terms of getting our budget passed. Now, we traditionally don't like to do that because it's a stabilization account. It would require a 2/3 majority vote to pull it out at town meeting, and we've been pretty good about putting money into it, but not pulling money out of it. And so, I think I would recommend, and we're not looking to do that in this case, but I just want to clarify the understanding from everybody's position so that they understand that we're not touching any of these funds based on the budget situation that we're looking at right now. It's only the free cash position that we're looking at, and certainly we'll have to take a really close look at how we fund the budget this year, and capital position that we have going forward as well. I think we're going to have to continuously look at grant options and things of that nature, try and help us with that in terms of some of the capital needs that we have, which I know we have, and I think we have to still look at that as a concern. All right. So the expenditure strategy. Does anybody have any questions about where we are with the revenue side and the expenditure side? Okay. All right, so this is the strategy that we've come up with at this point in time. To protect the town's conservative budget strategy, appropriations shall be limited to the existing programs and fixed cost increases only. Yes?
I apologize.
I'm sorry?
I have a question from Leah. Where did the money for OPEB and meals tax use to go? Or use go?
It would go.
Never do road.
It would come in from meals tax and from hotel motel tax. Okay.
It hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah, it hasn't gone anywhere. It hasn't gone. It's still there. We just haven't been able to utilize it. Yeah, the OPEB fund is still there. We probably have almost 10 plus million in that account, and we haven't touched that account.
It wasn't so it wasn't spent elsewhere.
No.
I think Leah's question is the money still in reserve to not be spent? And under our fiscal policies, we can't spend it on anything except for OPEB and road work. So it sits there, presumably at a town meeting in sometime in the future. We could then release some of that to go after, but it's not in the free cash number. It's not in other numbers. It's a reserve.
It's in that reserve placeholder. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill. Steph?
So the OPEB, so last year we did fund it.
Correct.
So are we planning on funding it this year, or we're just not sure yet?
We're not sure. It doesn't look like we are.
Okay.
But I do think that, and we've talked about this internally, that if our position at the end of the fiscal year allows us to do any kind of payment towards the OPEB fund, we would probably do that, just so it'd be less money that we'd have to make up later on. Because we want to get back to paying that and getting us back on track, but we don't want to, we can't do it right now, because we're just not in a position to do that.
Yeah.
But I do think,
The schedule that we had,
Yeah.
was that for us to pay it off earlier than it had to? Is there a certain date it has to be paid off?
no, there's no requirement to spend. In fact, we're, like, as I think we brag about this a lot, but that we're in a much better place because we actually have a fund.
Yeah.
Most places don't.
Okay.
And the requirement, we put it on the schedule to be paid off by 2035.
Okay.
All right, so at this point in time, I think it's 2035, is that right? Yeah. And so,
35, for some reason I thought it was 32, but,
no, well, that's probably the pension fund.
okay,
The
okay,
pension, they're two different funds.
okay.
All right, so that, and that's still on track, that we haven't touched that one at all. That's still, because that's assessed to us by Norfolk County, okay?
So there was no
So-
specific time we had to have it paid?
Right.
We just had set up a
schedule.
schedule we wanted to try to.
To pay it off, yeah, to pay both of those debts off by those periods of time. Now, right now, we're probably going to push it to 2036 because of we didn't pay it this year. But if we pay something towards that, it'll be that much less that we have to make up later on if we try and pay it, get us back on schedule. All right, so we'll continue to put us back on schedule when we can. We just can't do it right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one other quick question. So I think I remember Randy telling us that 22 was going to be a lean year. Maybe by Larry or Bernard. Do you recall that?
Yep.
At advisory committee, that 2022 was going to be, might be a tough year? Do you remember that? Do you recall that?
Well, he was,
I was just wondering, so the bad year came before the year he was expecting. So is there anything in 22 on top of COVID related that might carry over that, I guess this is a good, maybe a question for you, George. Is there anything else in 22, whether it's debt service or anything, that would make 22 be a little bit of a difficult year for us? Not COVID related?
No, off the top of my head, with the non-COVID related, if, the only thing I can think of that he was saying, and I'm sorry, I'm not looking back at you, but the only thing I can think of, and I'm speculating on what somebody was talking about a lean year, my guess might have been is when Bill was talking a few minutes ago about the free cash, and he said it was down. It's down from like 8 million, but that was a targeted, you folks put away this money in anticipation of putting it onto lowering and not doing an override, lowering your debt service. So my guess is what I mean, and again, I don't know what he was talking about, but at the time, but I mean, I'm thinking he might have said, well, gee, we really used up a lot of the free cash, it'll be lower.
And that's exactly right, actually. He was talking about the fact that we would be a lean year in terms of where we were in our free cash position.
It's not a question to have you
Yeah.
refer to something that was said by your predecessor. I was just wondering if you were seeing something that, I just, for some reason, that's sticking in my
No,
head.
you're right.
Talking about
I remember it,
22.
yeah, I remember it too, yeah, because he did say 22 was going to be the year, which our free cash position would dip down to an area where it doesn't normally do that. As you can see, historically, it doesn't.
Yeah.
So, but this is the year where it turned into that situation. So he was a bit of a prophet in that, and he was right. So there's been no surprises there in that respect. All right, so the town department shall endeavor to limit any significant increases in appropriations unless there was a fixed cost increase in place to support a current service that the town offers. The total estimated revenues of 78 million, that's town revenues now, doesn't include the water and sewer, of course.
You're right.
Are sufficient to support a budget increase of 2 to 2.5%, resulting in a surplus of approximately $393 or $16,000 respectively. So we could actually still increase operating budgets by 2.5%, which is probably in line with where costs are right now for the most part. Based on these revenue estimates, department heads could limit budgets so they do not exceed a 2.5% annual increase and be in line with our revenue estimates. The revenues and expenses numbers for fiscal year we will pivot as we did earlier this year as necessary to provide the Springtown meeting for the fiscal '22 revenue picture becomes more clear. So everybody recall that we actually had a budget in place back in, I think it was February or March. And then we said, okay, we got to take another look at this. And we started making cuts accordingly to make it fit within the projected revenues. And everything we did paid off. We put a limited hiring freeze and limited budget freeze in place to the end of the fiscal year. You can see what it did to our turnbacks at the end of the year. It turned into a $1.3 million turnback. So everybody did their part, and people have been very cooperative in doing what they need to do to make the budget process work. I still don't know how the school department pulled that one off, but that was a great move to get that done. I appreciate everything you did, because I knew you had a really challenging year in many different ways to make that happen. So glad you'd be able to do that. So that's the presentation. Just to talk a little about the milestone calendar. This year you can see yeah, go ahead.
Leah, can we ask department heads to hold budget rather than not to exceed 2.5% where appropriate?
Well, yes, and so the answer to that is that we say 2.5%. My goal is to try and limit it and lower than that, and actually we will be able to do that in some cases. And then it's more of an average that we're looking at to try and achieve, because some budgets will come in less than that. Some budgets might come in a little bit higher than that based upon their fixed cost position. But I think, generally speaking, the answer is yes. Our message to department heads is going to be, overall, don't exceed that number. And if you do, let me know, and we'll have to look at that and see how it might fit into the budget process. But clearly, our goal is to try and do that, yes, absolutely. So thank you for that question. So here is anybody else have any questions? I don't want to, yeah, sure.
This is probably a bit of a stretch, but I'm just thinking in the corporate world, in an extraordinary year, there is no way to, of course, this is pushing me to the limit, but ask for a flat budget or close to a flat budget. Again, this is extraordinary. Good to know that we have reserve and means to things, but everything being equal, given this is so extraordinary, there is no way to ask for, again, a level set number.
Well, to the greatest extent we can, we're going to try and do that. But here's the problem: is that you still have debt service, and you still have fixed costs impacts that are going to do that. We're not going to look to try and increase anybody's positions or anything like that. We're going to try and maintain everything as flat as possible. So I do think that's our goal, is to put it in that. But I think if you start going below that number, which is really the amount that you can raise by 2.5%, in terms of what's allowable under the state, under the levy limit, we can at least maintain services as we have them. So if I start going below that, some of them you'll hear from the departments as to why that's really not doable, because it really challenges them to keep things going. I think probably the biggest challenge is going to be from the school department to make that fit.
Yeah, and I would say, Bernard, basically we have, a $35 million budget, of which 80% is salaries.
Right.
Almost all of our contracts are still in force for next year. We have only 4, which are some of our smaller ones, our custodial, our maintenance, I think secretaries, that are up. So those aren't, the bigger players as far as our numbers, but those contracts settled at 2%. So the only way we could do that would literally be to lay off staff to do that. Unfortunately, in this particular time, we actually had to add staff. And, as Bill has pointed out, we've gotten the grant funds to cover a lot of that through 12/31. We're praying for grants to cover the second half of the year. We have taken care of our PPE needs through the year based on grants, but we're running, as Dr. Burdos can tell you, we're effectively running 4 different schools right now, with our remote schools, our in-schools, our hybrid schools, and that has put us into a situation of spending, just in the first portion of this year, about $350,000 to do remote learning, that are courses that the state side has put together through a contract, as well as the additional needs that we have to service kids that are having to be at home while we're still teaching kids that are in the classrooms. So we're hoping, obviously, I think all of us, that that's this year through June 30th, and that we get to some normalcy next year, starting in September. But our base issue is about a 2% increase in salaries that, are part of our contract base, which is the biggest part of our budget.
And Dennis,
Thank you.
Keith has the same question.
Yep.
For the FY 2022 budget, what is the assumption for COLA, if any?
It's not going to be anything more than 2%. And that's it's been, and that has not gone anything higher than that.
What are the changes that the overall pie will have to be shifted if school needs more money from the town side of the budget? Will we need to shift how the pie is sliced between school and town side?
Well, what we do is we sit down and we figure that process out where we are and to see how it fits. But, that's never been a battle between us. We really trying to make that work for all of us.
Yeah.
We know how important education is to the community, and we have to make it work. But, the way we've just laid this out for you, we've more or less identified how this is going to fit. So, everything is based upon the assumptions that we've given you tonight. If something shifts and we have to do something differently, then we have to pivot. We've been doing that since day one, and we'll continue to do that as we go through this. But we're dealing with things that we've never dealt with before. So I think, but generally speaking, I think we've handled it pretty well. And but the answer is we don't know until we're actually faced with that situation, and we deal with it.
And I think one of the other sides that we made this work this year was by reducing the CIP requests. The schools, because we run our own busing, we didn't get two of the buses that we would normally have in our rotation, which is about 160,000. I know Highway didn't get some of the vehicles they were looking, and other departments as well. That's going to come back to haunt the town a little bit, and I think we have to keep that in our view, because we can't go years without replacing buses because they come off. They're after 10 years or less if the condition of the bus is not good. We do live in New England with salt. It tends to eat these things apart. So right now we're 2 buses down. We're using older buses that our backups now are sitting there and have to be potentially our frontline buses if something goes down. And we can't afford to lose another 2 buses on top of that next year in the capital budget process. So I think, Bernard, to your question before, I think that's one of the areas that we all have to keep our eyes on. It's not just operating budgets. It's really some of the major tools that we use to operate this town as well have a cost.
From Dennis, is the 2% budgeted COLA above the expense of union contractual step increases for those not at the top of the grade?
It's 2% just the general cost of living adjustment. So that's so if somebody's at the top, they get 2% above. That's all they get is 2%, nothing more than that. Yeah, sure.
I just want to circle back to the question I asked earlier.
Sure.
The budget, the first 4 months were
Yeah.
89 million, call it 90 million.
Yeah.
I think I agree with him. I was under the impression that the town meeting that was passed was 83.9 million, and that included all water, sewer, and everything else. So, George, just wondering if you
The
can
indirect
explain.
costs, there's the one that you're, he's referring to. If you go, I wish I had like the town meeting book, but there's actually a line on there, and it looks like it's part of the bottom line. It's the indirects, but it isn't. It's not in the bottom line. It's there showing you, because, and the reason for that is, when we talk about those indirect costs, you're actually taking the money out of one pocket and putting it back in. We're paying ourselves back with the money from the water, water and sewer, which is essentially an enterprise fund.
Right.
So we're charging it back, but it's really not part of the budget. It's more of a revenue coming back in to us. So, but it shows, it's part of their budget, but it isn't in the bottom line because we're getting paid it. So we're really just transferring.
That
money
includes the
back.
debt service and things like that.
Yeah.
That goes with
Maybe
it.
we can take that offline, but to Bill's point and to Larry's point, if we go back to that page, it does not foot to 89 million. It does not. If we go back to that page, if
Yeah.
we add it up, it does not foot to, it says total, if we add it up, I mean, we can take that offline, but it does not
But-
to 89 million.
What I'm saying is if you include those two pieces, and then there's another piece that you don't actually, I think, and we're back, but I think that there's also another 1.1 million that it's for the overlay, but you don't vote
We can
the
take that
overlay.
offline, because
Yeah,
again,
We'll check, we'll double check it,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
we'll circle back.
But I think the
Yeah.
point is that I think it has to be explained further and up, but
Right.
it, you know, and if there's a mistake, we'll certainly fix that, but.
no, that's okay.
Yeah, but I don't know that, I think it's just a way it has to be.
It's the way
explained.
it's being,
Explained.
it's
Okay.
being put out, but you're
That's
voting a certain piece of it, but then you vote, not voting on certain other things.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Stephanie?
So, a little bit more of a comment, maybe more than a question. So, some of the concerns I have with us going forward is just, we're just not really sure when this is gonna end. I mean, to listen to the city of Boston has already decided to cancel the marathon in April. You know, things are being canceled already well into the beginning of the year. Is there ever a time financially that we feel like, I know we're in contract negotiations now, and this is anything, I'm not picking on the police, that's just the next one coming up. You know, I hear Phil talking about them, you know, at a 2%, on, you know, on the school side with salaries. So, do we ever feel like maybe we need to sit down and really look at, not the COLA, but the extra 2% that people are getting in lieu of being in a position somewhere down the line where we would have to lay off like other towns are doing? Or do we just feel like we have that extra money in free cash that's going to be our bailout some point? You know, I'm not wanting to say for people not to get their raises that they're used to getting. And it's a hard thing for me to say, because I don't want people to say, oh no, now she's talking about me not getting my raise. But in the big picture, and not really knowing what the damage is going to be and how far this virus is going to bring us into the next fiscal year, do we ever really have a serious conversation on where we are with salaries and raises, instead of, on the flip side, at some point saying, okay, we have to give layoffs. Instead of people losing jobs, we're just toning back until things bounce back. I know nobody wants to hear, oh my God, I'm going to get a raise, and it's hard for me to bring that up. But
So, well, let me.
I just feel like
yeah.
on the other side, okay, not on the municipal side, you know, there are companies that are just like, freeze, no raises, you know, and so are we ever going to be in that position that we're going to worry about laying people off?
Well,
Do we have a backup plan with raises instead of layoffs, so people don't lose jobs?
So that's a multi-layer question, so I'm going to tell you why. The answer is yes and no, okay? So right now, I think if we get through the next fiscal year, you have one more year in a contract after this year, Bill?
Next year is the last year of our
Next year's the last year. So I think we're aligning ourselves, let me finish my answer first. Well, I think we're aligning ourselves first with, we're aligning ourselves up so that almost all the contracts will be on in the same page. I think if we get to that point, which, by the way, we're not talking about this current fiscal year, we're talking about next fiscal year. So I'm feeling a little bit better about next fiscal year than I do about this one. So I think the answer is we'd be in a better position to plan for that if we did that. Now, this town has done that. That's not something we haven't ever done. I don't know that we necessarily need to do that at this point in time, because I think we're better positioned than other places to not have to do that. But I also think that if you're going to do it, you do it when and everybody's lined up in the same position to do it, so we don't hurt one group of employees versus another.
Yeah, and that's kind of why, like, I'm not suggesting that, I don't want us to not take care of any particular group of people. In my head, I'm really just thinking of the betterment so people don't lose jobs,
Right.
rather than us cut back a little bit. So
Yeah, I
I'm
don't-
not suggesting by any means for anybody not to
I
have
thi-
to
I think-
get a raise.
I think there are different ways you can address that, Stephanie. I think there, I agree with you. In fact, I don't know in 37 years, I think I've only had to lay off one person in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because we were able to make cuts in other areas, so we didn't have to do that. Because whenever you lay off a person, all that time and effort you put into training that person goes out the window.
Yeah,
So it's actually more, it really costs you money by doing that.
yeah,
The other piece of that is that we are at a point where I would not want to even have that discussion until we are all going to be impacted the same way.
yeah.
Do you follow me? Because I think if you do it that way, and if it takes a year where we're all impacted that way, it's far better to do that so that we're all feeling the same hit.
Yeah, I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure I made it clear. I
Yeah,
was not
understood.
suggesting any particular contract. I was just
Understood.
trying to think
Understood.
of
But that's the first way, and quite honestly, there are different ways you can address that. You don't have to fill certain positions when they become vacant. You can go with fewer people if you have to. That way you're not laying people off, and, you can address it that way. I don't know, Bill, do you have any further thoughts, or Amy, about how you would deal with that?
No, I think your point is right, that if you go back in the salary schedule, probably 8-9 years ago, there was a 0 year. It was offset because all the contracts weren't lined up, so it was done 1 year for a group of them, and it was done the following year for another group of them. But it was at least consistently applied where it went through. So I really do think for us, at this point, for us to do that, we would have to ask for an opening of any of the contracts
And that's
for
not easy to do.
FY22. So it's not like you can just do it. So obviously, there's a process to go through.
All right, yes, sir.
A comment from Leah, agreeing with Stephanie, we need to benchmark for COLA and have a discussion before it moves forward.
Well, a lot of those are already budgeted for next year. I mean, they're in the contract for next year. So I think that's what you're referring to. That's already in the contracts right now.
What positions have we not filled due to or during the pandemic on the town side?
We've slowed down filling. We have probably about, how many positions, Mike? There's a couple, there's one in finance, there's another one in,
Two half positions.
Two half is in finance.
We have half a position up in inspections.
yeah.
We have, those are the ones that come to mind right now.
Yeah, don't forget though that our original budget last year had 3 positions, 4 positions,
Mhm.
that we were going
Yeah,
to fund,
that we didn't
that
fund.
we didn't
Yeah.
fund
Right.
due to COVID also.
And we're also looking at creative ways to address positions in the town, even going forward into this current fiscal year, because, the other challenge we're facing is we're finding it difficult to fill certain positions. So we're trying to be creative in how we handle that. And hopefully we'll be able to do that, but the positions that have become vacant most recently are more at the director level, which you really can't go without those folks. Those people are running those operations. So we have to fill those. Yeah, Bernard?
Bill, how about operational efficiencies such as, is it the regional call center? I'm just thinking out of the box, all these operational efficiencies we're thinking. For example, this regional concept, would you say from not to say save money, but is it where we're expecting in terms of efficiencies already?
Yeah, well, so there's a lot of efficiencies that we've already built into our budget, if that's what you're getting to. I believe
Right.
we've done that. I mean, take for instance, regional dispatch. I mean, we just a year ago, we were spending $1 million on dispatch. Now we're spending $300,000 a year. So that's $700,000 right out of the gate that we've saved by going in that direction. I think there are other regional opportunities that we're going to look at. And when certain positions become vacant, or they through retirements or attrition, we can actually look at those. We continuously look at those options. Because it's difficult to fill certain positions, you have to be creative. And I think we've actually had that conversation internally about how we might be able to do that. And then, that helps us get through these difficult times, both on the filling of the position side as well as the financial side. So I think yeah, just doing it the normal way is not going to be, it's not going to stand up anymore. Not, at least right now. I mean, and let's remember, this is a temporary measure, and I think that, you know, we've weathered our storm and positioned ourselves better than most to do that. And I think that, you know, if you start tinkering with certain pieces of it, it's like a domino effect. It affects a lot of different pieces. So I'm very careful not to do that and to come up with different strategies so we don't have to set all the dominoes in motion.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? All right, well, it's 8 o'clock. I lied to you, it was because we said 8:30. So I do want to say thank you all and all those that joined us. I just want to go over this real quickly, though. This is the schedule, the milestone calendar. You'll note that we actually had our first conversation with the joint school administration on to help frame the budget process. That was October 15th. Today is the financial summit, including the revenue forecast with the Board of Selectmen, AdCom, and School Committee. And then the next benchmark will be Wednesday, November 25th. And we'll talk about the budget templates and guidance memo distributed to all the department heads. Well, they will start the budget process and assembling the budgets for next fiscal year. We'll start we'll that information and give it to them on the 25th or possibly the 30th, depending upon where we are. Friday, December 11th, all municipal budget requests will be in, including capital items due to finance. Monday, December 14th, the school committee will start their public review of school budget and it'll be due to finance. Friday, December 18th, budget document requests will be prepared and distributed to administration. And on Thursday, January 7th, that's in between the two holidays, of course, December 25th and January 1st. Thursday, January 7th, the town administration recommendation on department budgets will be made. And then on Friday, January 8th, the budget will be prepared and distributed to the Board of Selectmen. We then start the AdCom starts their process. We do the preliminary review of the budget to the Selectmen, and then the AdCom starts their process right after that. And then the preliminary budget review will occur with the Selectmen, and then on on Tuesday, January 19th, AdCom starts, January 20th, the AdCom starts its process of review of the financial articles and the non-financial articles and budget requests. And then also Wednesday, January 20th, the Board of Selectmen will be distributed to both the AdCom and the Selectmen. And January 22nd, the budget reviewed will be prepared and distributed to the AdCom again, and then we and et cetera, et cetera. Everybody can read that. I'm not going to keep reading it from the sheet, but it clearly goes all the way up until the town meeting we think will occur. None of us know that for certain, given what's just been going on. But I do think that the key dates there is that we want to be done, the final budget warrant sent to the printer by April 9th. So those are key dates in that respect. Everything has to be done and finished by then. Capital improvement process will be on Saturday, March 6th. Another key date to do that. So this will be our guidance for throughout the budget process starting tonight and moving forward from here. Certainly we'll give updates on where we are, and I'll give my updates to the Board of Selectmen during my updates during your meetings. We have constant communication between the school department, finance department, and the advisory committee. We've been meeting every 2 to 3 weeks, Larry, with you and Bernard,
Yeah.
to do preliminary discussions on the budget since July. So we've been really getting ahead of ourselves this year, which was great. And then Marie will be talking a little bit about the new budget process using the new ClearGov approach, which we're going to start on the town side of the government in terms of preparing the budget this year. So we'll be talking about that, probably in the next few weeks, giving people some guidance on how we proceed with that. Okay. If anybody has questions, certainly feel free to call me or to email me tomorrow or for the next several days, depending upon what questions you may have, or George or Marie. Any one of us can help staff-wise, but this is an open process, so we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to try and participate as best they can, so make this an easy process. It's going to be a challenging year, but if we work together, we'll get through it. Okay. Thank you all very much, appreciate it.
Very good.
All right, thank you. You want to just start with the motion to adjourn?
Make a motion for the Board of Selectmen meeting to adjourn.
Second, all those in favor?
Rob?
I make a motion for the school committee meeting to adjourn.
That's right.
Thank you, Tina.
All right.
I
And then,
make a motion for the advisory committee to adjourn.
Second? All in favor?
great. Thank you all very much. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christine.